Welcome back. Sunday evening. Good Sunday evening to you. If you watch C-SPAN ever, if you read the newspapers ever, if you pay attention to what's going on in the battle against radical Islam or international relations or religious freedom generally, you certainly know our guest, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. He is the author of one of the most important books of the decade, if not the most important book of the decade, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. He is the president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and a commissioner on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. He was in Washington, D.C. this week testifying on Capitol Hill. Good evening, Dr. Jasser.
Seth, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, thanks for everything you do. Tell us about the occasion for you being in D.C. this past week.
Well, Chairman Smith on the subcommittee from Foreign Affairs basically had a hearing which is very important to look at minorities and how they're caught in the middle of the Syrian conflict. And obviously what's been happening in Syria has been raging now for over 2 years. And as it goes on and more people die, we're approaching 100,000 people dead. What's been happening is the last card that the Assad regime has been playing in the last year has been one of stoking sectarian violence. And by pitting minorities against one another and stoking those flames and igniting it, what's been happening is it's causing the revolution in Syria to devolve into one that will not have any solution. And this is what happens when we leave it go on and on. I was talking about this 4 months into the revolution, that it started off as a political, peaceful revolution that then had to go military because of the fact that the regime would not walk away. But initially, you had many minorities fighting together with the Sunnis against the Alawite Ba'athists as a political battle. And then it devolved now because of Al-Qaeda coming in, because of Hezbollah, because of Iranian soldiers, the Revolutionary Guard, who are all of not only Alawite but Shiite extraction. As a result, they've been committing, acts against humanity in various towns that have been just inflaming beyond simply a political battle into one that is sectarian-driven. So as a result, communities like the Christian community, the Druze, and Alawites that are non-regime-based are finding themselves caught in the crossfire, and it is really causing it to devolve in almost in a Darwinian way into a purely sectarian battle coming out of Syria now.
Dr. Jasser, so much to talk about on this very point with you. Let me do some of it this way. Maybe the first neoconservative was Adlai Stevenson, Democrat, ran for president twice, and then served as an ambassador at the UN. He said, when America stumbles, the world falls. And you educated me early on to this point with regard to Syria, that when things were starting there, finally it looked like there might be a moment Assad could be pushed out or removed from an organic, actually a rare but organic uprising in Syria. We sat on our hands. We had a moment to shape it. We had a time period in which to shape the possibilities there. But because of the vacuum, I think nature not only abhors a vacuum, but terrorists thrive in them. Extremist elements thrive in them. We were gone, and the bad guys moved in and took over. We had a moment, as we did in 2009 in Iran, and we sat on it. Is that about right?
You're exactly right, and we keep missing opportunities. And the issue is, I would still say it's not too late. It is very late, but it's not too late. If we do nothing, as we continue to do, the countries that are going to shape Syria are going to be Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And in my testimony, as I was being yelled at by both sides, actually, I'll tell you in some ways, the right, Congressman Connolly was saying, we've had enough wars. Dr. Jasser, give me a guarantee that we're going to achieve something and not have these weapons used against our soldiers. And I said, listen, I can't guarantee you anything, but all I can guarantee you is Plan A of do nothing over the last 28 months has empowered America's biggest enemies and has generated the biggest source of terrorism in the Middle East now, which is Syria, because we've not been there. And currently, to say that Saudi Arabia and Qatar, which are on the side of the opposition and are helping arm them, are going to create and help put into place a post-Assad government that's going to be all wonderful with religious liberty is just folly. And to say that we're not going to, at some point in the next 2, 5, 10 years, have to pick up a major conflagration and get involved is also complete ignorance. So either we become somewhat of the adults in the area and start to help find the third pathway where we balance this battle between Sunni jihadists and monarchies like in Saudi Arabia and Qatar versus the Islamists of the Khomeinis in Iran and Assad and Hezbollah, or we just sort of sit back and let this thing play out, and in the meantime, it'll start to implode over the next few years.
You know, Dr. Jasser, I have to tell you, I am so sick and tired of people saying we've had enough wars. That it takes no intelligence to say that. Of course we've had enough wars, and of course we'd all like to sing peace songs. We'd all like to talk about men not learning war anymore. Of course we would. But unfortunately, we are not the world. We were not at war on September 10th, 2001. The war came, to paraphrase Abraham Lincoln, and it happens to us again and again and again. We were not at war on December 1st of 1941, and the war came. Unfortunately, the world sometimes can be a very dangerous place, and we can either be its victim or its shaper. That's my view. But one way or the other, we are going to be hit. And the question, no, not one way or the other. One way we will be hit, and one way we won't be hit. That's the point.
Exactly, and it's not a binary choice. You know, as you shape history, Congressman Kinzinger from Illinois was just very eloquent during the hearing, and he's a former military pilot, and said, he agreed with my position that as much as there's those on the left and the right saying that we need to stay out and not do anything because we don't know who we're going to be helping, we have to pick the better of two pathways and move forward and try to shape history. And America, as the world's last best hope, has a role and a moral obligation, not only and also an obligation to our ally Israel, who, if left without any involvement, will certainly be headed towards a Syria that will be emboldened. I mean, when you have America, in the testimony we laid out how the first red line that Obama put out in August 12, 2012, there were 30,000 dead. Now there's 93,000. So the world saw Assad exterminate 65,000 people after America laid out a red line. So to say that we still have influence, and then you wonder why we have traitors like Snowden going around the world and nobody really cares what we do, it's because our word in the world's biggest conflicts doesn't mean anything anymore.
I think you're right about that, and I think even before President Obama spoke about a red line, it was to be not taken seriously when he did say that. Already, Secretary of State Clinton had called Assad a reformer. Already, the Assad family had been treated to a special front page and then midsection of Vogue as this wonderfully avant-garde family of the Middle East. We have been fooling ourselves. And I think what we need is a little more Churchill right now, who instructed us that the chief path of the political science, the chief task of the political scientist, is to see things not how we want them to be, but how they truly are. To see things how they truly are. And it's juvenile, frankly juvenile, to just sit back and think it's not our business, because these things end up being our business. We'll be back with more from Dr. Zuhdi Jasser.
Great stuff. Make sure and like The Patriot on Facebook to keep up with the latest giveaways and event information, 960 The Patriot, and online, 960thepatriot.com.
Heaven is a place on earth would be a great thing if it were so. Unfortunately, there are some close to God-forsaken places in this world, and the question is, what happens in those places? We are talking about our fellow human beings, after all, and a place like Syria, it's hard to get a really good image, a really good sense of what is going on there, partially because of the ban. We are joined by Dr. Zuhdi Jasser of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, talking about what is going on in Syria. He testified before Congress this week. Doc, Tom Malinowski, the head of Human Rights Watch, gave us a little bit of a flavor in the current issue of The New Yorker. He compared it to the London Blitz. He writes, when aircraft appear in the sky, there is no warning and nowhere to hide. Each day, people just wake up and wish for bad weather. Each local council faces dilemmas. Should schools be kept closed, denying children an education, or should they be open, taking the chance that an airstrike could kill dozens of kids? Should people be asked to pick up their daily bread at bakeries, as they traditionally have done, even though government forces have repeatedly bombed bakeries as civilians lined up outside? The government is bombing bakeries in Syria.
It really is. And this is, our families we talked to, and I testified. I opened my testimony talking about how my mother and other immediate family will every day on Skype, hopefully, and sometimes they can't get through, wonder if they're going to talk to their family, and often cousins will disappear and never come back, and businesses are leveled. They've now consolidated from 3 homes for our family to 1 because the other 2 homes have been leveled. So this is an existence no different than it was in Berlin or in London in the height of World War II, where civilian neighborhoods were being carpet bombed, and that's what's happening. And the neighborhoods that are being bombed are 98% the Sunni neighborhoods, because that's the way to end a revolution when you have evolved into the sectarian battle. And I can tell you, certainly the population's been radicalized because they've not been able to win. They've not been able to exert the amount of power needed to defeat the Assads. But I can also tell you that the majority of Syrians, you're talking about 5 to 10 million Syrians out of 22 that have risen up against the regime. You don't have numbers in the opposition like that will lose. Eventually, Assad will lose, but the question is, will Syria become another Rwanda, as they're talking about now, or will it be able to have pieces in what was the crossroads of the Middle East between so many different cultures? It was a country that had the diversity to be able to pick up a democracy much different than Egypt's or Iraq's because of its diversity. But I can tell you one thing, Seth. You cannot defeat al-Qaeda in Syria without first defeating Assad. Just like every calculus in the Middle East, the dictatorships breed radicalism in order to control its minorities and majorities. And you can't defeat al-Qaeda, Jabhat al-Nusra from the opposition unless you first defeat Assad. And the Free Syria Army is saying we defeat Assad first, then we deal with al-Qaeda.
Dr. Jasser, thank you for that point. I'm very glad you made it because it relates to another point, which is when Americans say, well, we can't go everywhere. No, we cannot. But the question is, are we at war with Iran or not? Because Syria currently is the front of the spear for part of the front of the spear for Iran. It is a satrap of Iran. And it's not just a threat to Israel. It is a threat to the United States. It is a threat to all our allies. And I just, Dr. Jasser, would you organize a rally? Do it here in Phoenix. I'll join you. I'll speak. Because the voices for this point of view are not loud enough anymore. And I don't know how many exist. But if you want to speak and organize a rally, I will call out the troops for this radio show and as many in my contacts in my contact group as possible, and I will speak with you because this thing has the potential to undermine every gain we've made since 9/11.
Look, I'd be honored, Seth, because people need to understand. After President Obama announced he was sending arms just a week ago, Iran went from covert operations to overt. They said openly they were sending 5,000 troops to Syria to fight, and they sent them, and now they're in the process. So Iran's putting all of its eggs in this basket, and this is a proxy war against Iran. So, yeah, I agree. We need a rally to tell our president, our commander-in-chief, that this is a war not only for Syria and humanitarian reasons, but for the region and against Iran. And
we need to educate the rest of the American public, too. I've done a book on terrorism. You've done a wonderful book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. But this stuff is not getting out far enough. Let's not just educate the president, Doc. Let's you and I get together with other allies, and let's have a real old-fashioned teach-in like in the 60s and teach the rest of this country about what is going on and what the stakes are, not just for the United States, but for actually all those who are not into civilization abuse, because that's what we are facing, civilization abuse. That is the only other alternative. We'll be back with more from Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy.
You can find us online, 960thepatriot.com. The Arizona Politics and Culture tab is right there in the middle of the page. You can get podcasts to this program and share those with your friends. Also, get copies of Seth's monologue as well.
Oh, fathers, let's go down
one great voice to another. Wow, I hate leaving that, but I love Dr. Jasser, so we can continue in good faith with Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He is the author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. He's also in a fight to save his country, to save the West, and to put an end to this dictatorship chic, if you will, which not S-H-E-I-K, but how would you spell chic? The fashionable chic. I have to tell you, from the way Hillary Clinton spoke about the Assad regime, to the way Vogue magazine publicized the Assad regime, to the way previous administrations, I remember particularly Warren Christopher and the Clinton administration, they think Syria, they think the Assad somehow can be an ally of the United States. I don't know why they think this. I don't know why they think appeasing the front of the spear of Iran is in the United States or the West's interests. I do not get it. Can you help explain to me this what I call dictatorship chic, Dr. Jasser? Why is there this fascination with these dictators, and why are we unwilling to stand up to them?
Well, it's because of the price that we pay and the leadership in order to confront them. When I went to Saudi Arabia with the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, I was told by our ambassador, who was one of the largest donors to the Obama administration, who, by the way, also worked for Raytheon, making 6 to 7 figures, and was telling me to not be as open and confrontational, because if I want things to change with dictatorships like Saudi or Syria, that you need to do things behind the scenes. And I told them, we've tried that for 50 years and nothing's changing. Your operations behind the scene have continued to put thousands upon hundreds of thousands in jail across these countries, from Iran to Saudi, and we need to confront them openly with the pressure of world opinion. But they want to continue their own positions as ambassador, as, you know, sort of this. Michael Ledeen has a piece that he wrote a couple of years ago about the celebrity of dictatorship.
Yeah.
And basically, it's this upper crust mentality that almost forgets about the grassroots, what really democracy is, the people, that equality under God, and we seem to forget that it's what in the State Department's called clientitis, where they become almost enmeshed in the governments that they're at, and they forget the principles that we represent in America and liberty. So it needs a reboot. It needs somebody like President Reagan, who basically called a spade, and President Bush, who said that the Iraqis deserve the government that they want as individuals, not what they get pushed down from above.
All right, that's the other great lie. The first one was, we're sick and tired of wars, or juvenile statement that doesn't require much thinking. The other great one is we need to do things quietly, pipe down, Dr. Jasser. That kind of thing drives me nuts. This is the realpolitik strategy of Henry Kissinger, which got rid of Democratic allies and abandoned them and made them wonder whether it was more expensive to them to be our ally or our enemy. It is what normalized relations with some of the worst regimes in the world, like China. And it is the kind of thing Reagan fought all his political career against. It wasn't until Ronald Reagan put the fear in the hearts of the Iran Ayatollahocracy that they released our hostages. And it wasn't until President Reagan, against all statements to the contrary from his State Department about not mentioning prisoners of conscience, until he did start mentioning prisoners of conscience, did the Soviet Union start getting publicly embarrassed and start releasing prisoners of conscience. It was the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. I can speak of the history of the Soviet Jewry movement, right? We were told to pipe down. Things can be done quietly. No. When things were quiet, things were quiet. When a point was made about these individuals, it not only helped those individuals in their own consciences, not only did they say they appreciated the vocal support, but the Soviet Union started worrying about their reputation and started having to play by the rules, the norms of the game.
And that press conference between Putin and President Obama a week or two ago was just absurd. To hear Putin talk about the Syrian opposition as if they're all eating organs and cannibals, which was that one bizarre video that came out, right. And then to have our president sit back and say nothing in defense of the opposition just sort of showed that he is unable to articulate why we do things. So I can see some of my conservatives say, Zuhdi, your battle is good, but this is just the wrong commander-in-chief. And I'll say, well, the world is at a tipping point. Yeah. If we ignore it now and wait till 2016 and hopefully we get a different president in there, who knows if it'll be what'll be left in Syria. It may be too late. So we have to deal with the chief we have, but also put pressure on him and stop sort of just listening to maniacs like Putin, who are still in the old Cold War mentality and allow them to characterize what we stand for as if we stand with cannibals. I mean, it's just absurd.
It is absurd. And I'll tell you, the other thing that's absurd is the refusal of this administration to understand who an enemy is and who an ally is. People do not understand the connection between Hezbollah, Iran, and Syria. Hezbollah is the A-team of terrorism. Okay, we've all been lectured about and learned about Al-Qaeda for the last 10 years or so. But before Al-Qaeda, there was Hezbollah. And during Al-Qaeda, there was Hezbollah. And if there's ever, God please, a day since Al-Qaeda, there will be Hezbollah. Hezbollah is operating because Iran exists. It is a wholly owned subsidiary of Iran. It has killed more Americans than any other terrorist group with the exception of Al-Qaeda on 9/11, but it continues to thrive and operate not only through the Middle East, but now we know in Central America at our borders. This is a lethal organization that not only is trying to infiltrate the United States, but has successfully at times gotten into the United States, and it has more blood on its hands, more American blood on its hands than any other terrorist organization in the world over the last 50 years.
There's no doubt about that, and we were involved heavily back 6 years ago in removing El Manar, Hezbollah satellite station from Europe and an American satellite reach because it was promoting terrorism against Americans in Iraq and elsewhere. So this is a font of terror that spreads throughout the Middle East. Lebanon was owned by Syria for as long as for decades.
Since about 76
finally,
or so,
Syrians
right?
pulled out.
Yeah. Since about 1976, right?
Exactly. And the issue is that now Qusayra almost turned into another massacre last week because of Hezbollah's operations in southwest Syria, and they're continuing to move. There's more and more Hezbollah soldiers that are part of. Assad would not be around as long as he is today if it wasn't for Hezbollah soldiers and Iranian soldiers, because the defections in this battle have been going in one direction. And if it wasn't for the external influence of those two entities, he would not have enough soldiers, because the Syrian people are growing in their opposition, and it's really just a matter of time. But the question is it months or years, and we don't know.
And I have to say, the one thing that most Americans don't know, because, again, of the way the administration talks about it and the media publicizes it, is when Hassan Nasrallah and other leaders of Hezbollah lead rallies, yes, they do say death to Israel. Of course they do. But they also say death to America. They shout death to America, and throngs of thousands, of tens upon thousands, shout back death to America, death to America. They aren't chanting it because they don't believe it. They are chanting it because they do. Could you say a word or two about the antipathy towards America from these groups as much as it is against Israel?
Absolutely. This is at the core of their entire narrative, is that they are advancing the cause of Khomeinism, of the Islamism, of the radical Hezbollah mentality. Nasrallah collectivizes community by talking about conspiracy theories, and they are protecting the world in their mindset against the West. And it's not only Israel, it's actually, to them, it's about anti-Westernism and anti-Americanism. So this is the bonds they build with Russia. They work closely with Russia for economic reasons and because of their joint antipathy against America. And the conspiracy theories are what drive a lot of this. And we've been missing in action as far as helping promote positive. We had an opportunity in Syria to say, you know what? America is there to protect you against the radicalism of Hezbollah and counter their conspiracy theories. And sure enough, we've allowed Saudi Arabia and Qatar instead to fill that vacuum.
The most heartbreaking thing I think I've read since the inauguration of President Obama was during the uprising after the elections in Iran in 2009. We had for a spell a New York Times reporter on the grounds in Tehran covering the protests after the fraudulent election, and he spoke to people on the streets, students, and they were saying to him, "Where's America? Where's Obama? Where's America? Where's Obama?" And we gave him an answer. The answer was, we're not going to get involved. Of course, we did get involved in Egypt in helping propel the Muslim Brotherhood into office. But again, here we are, and in Syria, where another organic revolution like in Iran fomented, and we were missing. It seems to me Assad is not going to last. One way or another, he's not going to last. And the question is going to be, for those who take over, whose side was America on? To answer that question in the negative, I believe, is going to lead us down another moment of history that's not going to only be embarrassing, but dangerous.
It really is, Seth, and this is really the crux of this entire discussion, is that Syrians are not going to forget who came to their aid.
Right.
And their radicalization. And then we talk about radicalization in many different elements. And part of the radicalization is, do they see Islamism and the Islamic State, that not only Al-Qaeda, but the Brotherhood and others that may take over Syria, do they see that as their only option? And if they're going to get other options, they need to have strong relationships with the West, with America, because we're the only part of the world that gives them something that's palatable beyond Arab fascism or is the Islamic State concept. And if they're going to have that option, then we need to begin to be involved on the ground in helping them reboot what are the only two options they've had in the last 50 years. And us being missing in action has allowed Qatar, which is in bed with the Brotherhood now for 50 years, Saudi Arabia, which has a form of Salafism and Wahhabism that it wants to spread, to bring those ideas as a replacement of Assadism, which to them is clearly been a failed formula. So, we have to help advance liberty there. And if we don't, we're going to lose the Middle East, and Israel is going to be at more risk than it's ever been.
All right, Dr. Jasser, I'm going to hold you to this. Let's you and I do this. Let's do for this movement. Let's do for the Syrians. Let's do for the region. Let's do for America what the movement for Soviet Jewry did in the 70s. Let's educate. Let's hold teach-ins. Let's take it to the streets as we need to. And in the meantime, let me thank you again for all your hard work, all your hard writing, all your hard talking, and all your hard thinking, because that's what we need. We need hard men like you in these tough times. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser has been our guest. He is the president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. He is a commissioner with the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, and, of course, the author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. He is a personal hero to me and a public hero to me as well. Bill Bennett and I wrote in our book that if we win this war against terrorism, it'll be in large part due to the intellectual lifting and work of Dr. Zuhdi Jasser.
Wow. This is a great first hour. Dr. Jasser, thank you very much for your time this evening.